I am the Extension Cropping System Specialist now at the Carrington Research and Extension Center. I'm going to talk about managing corn in the East. Then Claire Keene will be next and fill in any gaps and talk about corn production in western North Dakota because I think for corn, there's more of a difference between the East and the West than what there is in soybeans. So we don't discriminate against anyone with NDSU extension. There are some great publications here that I'll refer to a little bit and that you can take a look at your leisure. There is the basics of corn production in North Dakota that was developed by Joel Ransom when he was here as a serial agronomist, and then Joel Ransom and Greg Endries worked on this corn growth and management quick guide, and there's a lot of great information if you're new to corn production. Even if you've been at it for a while, it's a good idea to look at that publication on an annual basis to help you out and know where things are at. So, with that in mind, let's look at the critical vegetative stages for corn. And you can see that at the V3 stage, which is approximately 9 to 12 days after emergence, if you notice at the bottom, it talks about the GDDs, growing degree days, using a base of 50 and a max of 86 degrees. It is more predictive in growth stages than days because each day has a different amount of temperatures. And that's why there's this range in days. But a lot of us like to think about days, but it is more accurate to calculate GDDs in its growth and development. So at this V3 stage, the ear shoots are initiated, nodal roots are growing. That's the first time that they start developing, and I'll talk about planting depth and how important that is for that event to occur. And so the potential ear number is determined at this point in time. In the V4 to V5 stage, about 14 to 21 days after emergence, ear shoot initiation is already completed. The kernel rows have already been determined at this stage, and that's quite amazing, you know, that young plant, and yet the kernel rows have already been determined for yield. At V6, the nodal roots are the dominant source of nutrients and for the plant to grow, and we need good nodal roots for picking up the most nutrients and providing support to the plant. And now the growing point is above the soil surface. At that point in time, if we receive hail, that's going to be the most significant damage from that point and beyond. Because that growing point is exposed. Hail prior to that has less impact, not necessarily no impact, but less impact on corn growth and development. And so nutrient water uptake has to be at its maximum at this point in time. And then from V12 to V14, which is about 42 to 49 days, the ovules, the number of seeds basically is determined. And so the number of kernels per row are determined during that time frame. So anytime we have stress, we have the opportunity to reduce yield at these key stages. Reproductive, we go through 6 different stages, with R1 being silking and pollination. And I remember in my younger days there being quite a bit of difference between the time period of silking and pollination, with pollination the silks coming out and then the pollen coming out. And so this idea of VT tasseling and going from silking to pollination, that's really the one that's been almost simultaneous anymore. Almost at the point in time that the tassel is coming out today, pollen may be shedding and silking isn't far behind, which is great, and probably one reason why we have better corn yields, because we're getting that pollination to occur more succinctly. Then we go to the blister, milk, dough, dent, and then we get to physiological maturity. Once you see that black layer, you can see in the lower right corner, that's what's important to know. So with that, some planting practices. This comes from Jeff Coulter out of the University of Minnesota. These are some of the practices that impact your corn yield the most. And you can see the number one factor is hybrid selection. And Claire's going to talk a little bit more about that. Selecting the right maturity, selecting the right hybrid is critical for corn production. That's where you're going to gain your greatest yield. You can see having a crop rotation versus continuous corn also provides an increase in yield. And I'll talk about this uniform emergence, showing you some data, how important that is in increasing our yield. And so you can see then basically, if you look through the list, that some of these other things are pretty minor, with the exception of if you're growing continuous corn and how you manage that residue is important. But if you're not in a corn rotation, then that doesn't play much of an issue. And you can see that basically hybrid selection, crop rotation, and uniform emergence, it will account for up to 90% of your corn yield. So I always like to say you only get one chance to plant corn. And so here are some things to consider. Avoid tillage and planting in wet soils. This is extremely critical. If you're going to get clods if you work it too wet, and if you're no tilling or even working in wet soils, when you plant, if you get sidewall compaction and you're not able to close the trench to get good soil to seed contact, you will not get the best emergence out of that. One of the things that's been interesting to me, and I'll show you some data here, is that planting at the proper soil temperature is critical. The minimum germination soil temperature at the seed is 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So the warmer, the better. The faster we get every single plant out at the same time, the greater your yield capacity will be. And soil temperatures below 50 degrees after water uptake can injure germinating corn, which we call chilling imbibition. So the point here is if you plant corn under good conditions, you get enough water for the seed to start taking up moisture, and then we get to 40 degrees, you have a chance to injure that plant. So you need to always look ahead when you're planting, and consider stopping planting instead of planting right up to rain. We need to plant at the proper depth. Nodal root development is critical, as I talked about earlier. Planting depth should be no less than 2 inches, and more is better, actually. But it depends on your soils and the opportunity for crusting as to how much deeper you want to go. And you should always try to plant the corn into moisture if at all possible. Avoid excessive pre-plant tillage because you're drying out the soil. Planting date early to mid-May is best. Though again, you should base this on soil temperature. Final plant population, we say in North Dakota, is between 28 and 32,000 plants per acre, at least in eastern North Dakota. And Claire will talk about that in her presentation for western North Dakota. And Minnesota says 32 to 34,000 plants per acre. So this to me is an important slide. So if you look at the planting dates on the left of this and you look at the middle column, you can see from 1988 to 2003, your greatest yield was in that April 30th to May 5th time frame. But if you look at the data since that time frame, you can see that the from 2009 to 2011, that actually planting a little bit later under, again, better conditions. And that's part of what we've learned is planting under the right soil temperature conditions, the right soil moisture conditions, we can actually improve our yield. And so planting later is not necessarily a bad thing. I know that my brother farms. I'm from Ohio originally, and he believes strongly in this. If the soil is not fit to plant from a moisture standpoint, if the temperature is not present, not proper, you leave the planter in the yard. And if the better thing to do is start planting soybeans. If you're getting antsy to plant, it's better to plant soybeans early and plant corn on a timely manner. Again, because of this idea that you only get one chance to start things. Plant population should be based on seed cost. I gave you what the proper population is for eastern North Dakota at 28 to 32,000, and some I know are planting more than that. But you need to consider the cost of the seed. And I asked a couple of people yesterday, the current seed cost is about $245 per unit, depending upon the traits that you have. This data that I'm showing you is from the University of Minnesota. And you can see that the higher the price of the corn seed, the lower the population you should plant from a standpoint of maximizing net return. And unfortunately, with our $4 corn price right now or less, you can see that maybe we need to consider planting fewer seeds because of that. All right, so here's a study that was done on the impact of plant establishment on grain yield. This was done in 2013 to 2014 across the state in 14 different counties. And the way this chart looks is look at the green bar. If you have a normal emergence date, you get 100% yield. If a plant is next to a skip or next to late emerging plants, you can get higher yield. But notice if you go below that green line, once you get to a double, once you get to 5 or 7 days or later emergence of a single plant, that later emerging plant really becomes a weed in a sense and does not provide you much yield compared to uniform emergence. That is extremely critical in maximizing corn production. If we talk about row spacing, this is some work done at Carrington in 2012 and 2013. Previous work had showed the difference between 15 and 30, and I didn't present that today because this, I think, is the most important data set. I think 22 inch row corn for us in the north is really a great way to be where we should be at. And you can see always every year here, the 22 inch row corn performed better. You had a 5.5% increase in yield by going to that 22 inch. And again, 20 is sufficient as well. And we certainly have planters that do that. So that's kind of where we're at with row spacing. In North Dakota, we have a Jekyll and Hyde situation for water. This is pictures from this spring in Griggs County. You can see the negative impact of too much water on corn. It greatly stunts the corn, makes it turn yellow, and that's not a good situation. But we can also be too dry. and that can happen very quickly. And unfortunately, sometimes that happens early in the season, and sometimes that happens late in the season. So seed companies have developed drought tolerant corn. You can see in this chart, here is a study done in 2022 looking at six different hybrids, two non-drought tolerant hybrids and four drought tolerant hybrids with three different water regimes of 0, 50, and 100%. And in this table where it says no, it was not drought tolerant. Where it was yes, it was drought tolerant. And you can see the amount of water that was applied. And you can see that there is an advantage to having drought tolerant corn if you're not putting water on. But the clear message here is water is critical for corn production. And so even with drought tolerant corn, you cannot overcome profitable corn production without additional water. You can see once you get to 50% of the water, you can see then that having a drought tolerant corn may not improve your yield. And if you go to 100%, that's even true there as well. So even at having 50% of normal water, you're not gaining anything by having a drought tolerant corn. So there's not much advantage. We need to talk about fertility because we were unable to get Brady Gadel on here today. Nitrogen fertilization, if you look at this chart, you can see the years at Carrington, then what the nitrogen was in the second column in the soil profile before planting. Then you have the highest yield based on the nitrogen rate, and then you have the highest ROI. And in the far right, you can see the rainfall from May through August 3rd. The chart on the left is dry land, and you can see there's huge amount of variability over years because of the variability in rainfall. But basically, if you look at this red bar, the average, you can see the highest yielding corn has been with 110 pounds of nitrogen, but actually the highest rate of return has been with only 57 pounds of nitrogen. And so it's amazing to me. You can see zeros up here, even in higher moisture years. But you can see if you look at irrigated, how important nitrogen is. If you do have water, nitrogen will benefit you in yield. And you can see the highest yield usually comes from about 157 pounds of nitrogen per acre. And the highest ROI is about 107 pounds. So twice what we get in dry land you need for irrigated corn. And that's why we have irrigated corn. We want to maximize yield, but we have to fertilize for that. We should always make our nitrogen recommendations based on the NDSU corn nitrogen calculator. That is extremely important and is available here for you as a link. And you can go to the NDSU to get that information. Phosphorus fertilization on the left-hand side, I just wanted to let you know that there are different parts of the state as to what the Olson soil test P level, how much phosphate fertilizer we should apply based on the Olson soil test. So if we're in the medium range, which is 8 to 11 parts per million, you can see you need less phosphate west of the river, the Missouri River, and you need higher east. And if you're irrigating, you need even more phosphorus. And so that's important. And you can see in the chart that either banding phosphorus at the time of planting with a 10-34-0 Regardless of the level of parts per million of phosphorus in the soil, you can get an increase in yield, and you can do it in furrow and still see the same benefit. This is data for 8 site years, and this information is coming from the publication on phosphorus fertility. We have a special one just for phosphorus. So in summary, on phosphorus, a 2x0 band is similar to N furrow, and that should give you a 4 to 5% increase in yield compared to the untreated check. 6 gallons per acre of 1034O is equal to 3 gallons per acre in furrow. And so we can use less to save a little money and get the same effect in yield. A band plus in furrow is equal to a band or in furrow. So there's really no difference there, but putting something on at planting is important. A deep band plus in furrow is equal to just banding, and that's better than deep banding. In furrow, low salt 624-6 can provide the same level of response as 1034O. And then one of the other things that's important for corn is zinc. So make sure you're testing your soils for zinc levels. And when you're putting 1034 on, if we put some chelated zinc on, you can see at the bottom here, it says at 1/4 of a gallon per acre. This was 5-year average. And you can see that there was a 7% increase in corn yield by adding zinc to the phosphorus fertilizer. Then we want to just talk quickly about potash fertilization. And so there is a potassium calculator, just like there is for nitrogen. I'm showing an example here. You have to understand this map and where you're at. If you're in the white areas, that means you're less than 3.5 smectite to illite clay ratio. And if you're in the gray areas, that means you're greater than 3.5 smectite to illite clay. And you need to then have a soil test level of 200 parts per million. And if it's less than 3.5, you only need 150 parts per million in the soil to provide adequate nutrient. And one of the critical things you have to understand is that the maximum potash rate you ever want to apply in a single season is 120 pounds per acre due to salt injuring the corn. And so you can see in this example, if you have less than 3.5, you have a 101 to 149 part per million soil test level at our current $4 corn price. And I looked up the price. It's a little around $300. The closest was this 0.2 or $240 per ton. And so you should be applying 90 pounds of potash then to this field for proper fertility. So with that, I am finished with my presentation.